Hello, everyone. Welcome to Engineering Advice You Didn't Ask For. We are back for episode number 6 in season 2. And this time we have a special guest joining us. So we have David Pereira joining us. So David is a passionate product leader. He has over 10 years of product management experience. Over the last few years, led many product teams. He has a number of accolades. He has led teams that have resulted in $4 million in cost savings, just with a $200,000 investment. His motto is the faster we learn, the faster we succeed, which is something that I resonate well with. But maybe we'll start with a quick roundtable and then we can go from there. So my name is Keyur Hindoja. I'm an engineering manager based out of Toronto, Canada. I've been doing the managing gig for about 5 to 6 years now.
My name is Vic. I am a principal engineer at Twilio. Prior to this, I've been all over the IC track, and I've also been a director of engineering, and I also have a few side projects on the side. So I do my own product management.
Hello, everyone. I'm Louis, former engineer, recently turned entrepreneur. Most recently, I was actually senior director at Walmart running their pharmacy tech. And right now, I'm basically placing a bunch of small bets, trying different software projects. So I am a PM as well.
Hey, I'm Mithra. I'm an engineering leader currently at Pave, and I've been an engineering manager across different startups and at big companies like Amazon. I've done my own startup myself, and now I'm pursuing other outside of work things like this podcast.
Hello, folks. My name is Thiago. I'm director of engineering at Nubank. I've been on the management side of engineering for the past 6 years now. And as David, I'm also super passionate about writing online, especially on LinkedIn and Twitter. And I think that's my hobby, the hobby that I didn't know I had.
So currently I am a CPO at a startup at the very beginning in Germany, trying to innovate in the outdated maritime industry. And over the last 15 years, I have been part of the same equation, but in different part of that as software engineer, product owner, product manager, CPO, head of product. And what I realized is most of the teams face more or less the same problems. And that's one of the reasons I started writing. And it was just for sharing, and it became a hobby, now a side gig, and it's quite fun. I became addicted to that. I cannot stop.
Thank you for sharing, David. Maybe we can get into some definitions before we kick things off, because not everybody in our audience might be familiar with what a product owner is versus a product manager versus a product leader. I know sometimes terms and responsibilities are used interchangeably. So maybe, David, if you want to share a little bit about what background one would ideally have or what responsibilities they would have in an organization.
That's a quite interesting question because it depends who you ask and which company you are looking at and the framework they use. So I'd say in general, product owner is an accountability inside Scrum, which is best filled by a product manager. That's the ideal scenario. So you have one person from end to end. But what is commonly happen is that the product manager is the one responsible for the strategy, talking to customers, coming up with the business model, product strategy, and so on, prioritization. And the product owner is responsible for the execution. This is the common way in SAFe, or one of the frameworks. And then many companies, even if they don't use SAFe, they would use this format. And the product lead would be someone who oversees a team and lead them. Particularly, I am more a fan of, no matter the title, is one person from end to end, leading the teams strategically, tactically, and to execution.
So in your opinion, who is a good product manager, or what are some of the skills a good product manager should have? And what do they do differently from, let's say, the engineering teams or the go-to-market teams or the marketing teams?
It's a very hard position. I try imagining like an orchestra, and there is a person there conducting the orchestra and needs to ensure that they play the music beautifully, synchronized, on time, and so on. So for me, a product manager is a good leader, knows how to make decisions fast when necessary, gives guidance to the team, set the context, is good with communication, I would say it's a polyglot, like giving the right information to the right audience at the right point in time in the right format. It's quite complicated to do that because you have business, engineering, and then you have customer. And if you speak the same way to everyone, the message doesn't come across. So I think these are the key aspects that you would see in a good product manager.
I want to add something that I think David mentions quite a lot on his articles that I think is also really important. One thing is what makes a good product manager. Another thing is what kind of environment is this product manager inside, right? Because I feel that a lot of times product managers have so many constraints that they don't have the autonomy to actually make decisions and to actually be the product manager, right? They're more product proxies. So like they're giving the solution to the problem and okay, you have to execute that. They're more like project managers sometimes. And I feel is another part of the role that's quite challenging is like a good product manager needs to be on a good environment that he has the flexibility to apply those principles, to influence the team, right? And not be constrained by stakeholders. So I think is a quite interesting subject on that area, right?
One thing that I learned, like in the beginning, I used to complain, saying, I don't have this power, I cannot make decision, I rely on the others and so on. But then over my journey, as I grew up on this, I would say, I learned how to play with the cards I have. And the cards I don't have, I name them and I say the cost of not having. And I just ask them, is that what you want? You want us to bet very high on a solution that we have no idea if that produces value. If that's what you want, you're the boss, I'm gonna do, not recommending. So I try creating opportunities to coach them. And so I would say a good product manager is a good coach as well, because you need to help the others see the other way. It's not because they are bad, it's just they haven't experienced another way of working.
So product managers often, but often they do not have direct reports, or their scope of influence is a project or a program that's far reaching. What can good product managers do to influence and make sure that the deliverable stays on time?
So I think they need to be very good on setting context and constraints, because if the more open they leave that, so the more I would say engineers can try different things, and we struggle to understand what should we do here, what should we do there, and so on. So one example I like giving is once I did this with one of the teams. I said, this CMS is not working for editors. It's too slow. We need to change it. And then the developer looked at me and said, "Ooh, okay, so we need to change our infrastructure," and started saying, maybe we need to change Kubernetes and this and blah, 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 blah. It will take around 1.5 weeks. I said, seriously? And then I said, I realized that I didn't give the right information. I said, because our servers are in Europe. And he understood that all people in the world should be editors. I said, not really, only the ones in Hungary. I said, okay, that's easy. 30 minutes, I get it done.
That's awesome. A context does make a lot of difference. So a lot of the panelists here today have an engineering background, and some of them are currently engineering managers or used to be. Product managers and engineering managers are like partners in crime, right? So what do product managers need the most from engineering managers to be effective?
I think it's a partnership, but knowing which part to expect from everyone. Because for some time in my life, I thought that the product manager was responsible for the what and the engineer manager for the how. And then I would be very dogmatic on the what. And if it wouldn't go like that, I would annoy the engineer manager. But that I realized became a kind of service provider relationship, not a meaningful one. And what I learned is the following. Product manager is actually responsible for the why. Why does that matter? What should we achieve? And why is it connected to our strategy, to our vision, and so on, and bringing context. And the what is formed together. For example, in which time frame do we have that? Maybe it's in a moment that we don't have enough evidence. We need to create that. So maybe we need to increase the technical data in the beginning because we are going to experiment with, and potentially we're going to drop the solution if it doesn't work. then we align. So the what is built together. And then the how, yes, the how will be the engineering manager saying, based on what you shared, that's the best course of action to reach this result.
One comment there related to the how, and I think the product manager can also influence the how, right? Can also give ideas on the user flow, what kind of things to compromise on the user experience. I think the how is kind of also a shared activity, but I agree that the engineering manager usually has a lot more stake in the game there, a lot more to influence than the product manager.
Will agree. I think it's the influence is the part, right? Because the engineer can also influence on the why does that matter? The vision, it seems that this doesn't relate to that, can challenge it. So that's the sustainable partnership. There's a little bit of challenging each other all the time. So that's the nice thing that happened.
Just speaking on influence and working together between engineering and product, what is your preferred, or would you say ideal way of engineering influencing the product roadmap or product strategy?
So my preferred way is having the product trio or the three amigos working together. And I like saying that when we are doing it right, this trio is working 80% in the future, 20% in the present, and the rest of the team is inverted. And that is quite helpful.
Sorry, David, for those who don't know, can you just explain what the three amigos are?
Yeah, so I would say the three disciplines that influence the most in the product: a product designer, product manager, and an engineer manager in general. So yeah, so I think that's the way preferred. And I would say the engineer manager should raise a hand and say, if we keep going this way, I need to understand the growth because the technology we have right now is not made for that. So help me understand where you are going, because otherwise we need to invest more in technical, because it's very common for product managers to neglect this and expect magic. So they push for more features, functionalities, and growth and so on, and don't look at the infrastructure. And when engineers look at them like in a year time and say, we need to invest 6 months rebuilding things, product managers freak out. This could be avoided if they had an open room to speak with each other and be more transparent.
Pardon me for stereotyping, but product managers are usually always saying, I want everything and I want it now. And engineering is always pushing back, you can have it, but in 5 years from now. I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, but how do you balance the need to ship features quickly with the need to maintain product quality and a reasonable technical debt?
I think it goes a lot with the environment. When product managers have this mindset, it's because probably they are measured by output and they need to meet deadlines with prescriptive roadmaps. Because there's this idea of a great product is the one you have nothing else to add, which I disagree. I think a great product is the one you have nothing else to remove. So I think about the product is more or less, what is our strategy right now? And then you think, where are we going to bet and where are the low-hanging fruits? Let's have a balance, because you cannot expect only to have low-hanging fruits. You need to make some bets and then balance there. And then you need to keep the lights on. So you need to look at the 3 different angles and provide focus to the team. What I like doing when it comes to technical debt is saying, guys, if we have to close the technical debt, let's invest direct time into that. I know it can be annoying, but then I will use the time to do more discovery with the trio, as I said, while the team is wrapping up things and making the foundations more solid, so to say.
David, so the three amigos is product design and engineering, right?
Mhm.
And you said that this trio spends 80% of the time looking to the future and 20% looking the past. What kind of activities or what kind of things do you do look in the past, look in the future?
Yeah, so when I say looking at the future is, for example, we have many assumptions and they are untested, we need to test them. Exploring problem space, and this is more like navigating on the problem space, trying to see what do customers care about. Then it would be interview, prototyping, user testing. It is very relevant to have an engineer there, because otherwise, let's say we product managers and product designers will go in a very distant direction. And the reason I like keeping this 80% in the future is not to overwhelm the team with the now. Because from my experience, at least, if you want to get engineers annoyed, consume their time with things that they want not to use right now, because now they want to code, they want to create something relevant at this very moment. So leave in space. And then the 20% I said on the now, you share the results. You say, here's what we learned. So this problem space, here's what customers care about, and here's how we can create value. Now let's talk about a potential solution for that.
Yeah, that goes a long way in explaining the context to the dev team and the reasoning, the why behind what we are building, and showing them that this is the future, this is what we are focusing on. On the flip side, I've had product managers in the past that come to the dev team after the sprint has started and said, okay, let's throw all this feature work out because we need to focus on A, B, and C. This is suddenly more important. It wasn't 3 days ago, but as of today, it's important. So all the time we spend discussing and refining is out the window. We need to work on this. So that is very disruptive, and often a lot of engineers will get peeved over that.
And it's very connected to one of my thoughts about transparency, because a lot of people work with Scrum and they misunderstand transparency with overwhelming the team with information. I did that myself. For example, once we were working on an online shop and we had overloaded our customer service, and we needed to do something about it. So I was exploring with a chatbot, but it was really like a raw, undigested idea, so to say. I brought to the team this, and we started talking. Guess what happened? The team forgot about the sprint. They started looking at the chatbot. We failed the sprint goal because I distracted the team with something that I actually didn't know if we would even do it. So you need to have a selective thing that you share with the team. And I always think, does this help the team right now with what they have? Or should I just share with the trio and then we discuss, we work a little bit more on the idea, and then we bring to the team with context, not just a very undigested, because that leads to frustration and distractions.
It sounds like maybe the team wasn't aligned with the rest of the organization in terms of what the actual priorities are. Because then your sprint goal kind of contributes towards whatever it is your quarterly OKR or whatever it is you're working on. And nothing is a surprise. No one feels like, oh, I need to drop what I'm doing. Or it really has become something that is so important for the entire organization. And you're not peeved about dropping the work you're doing because organizational priorities have changed, not just, oh, the product manager wants you to explore a chatbot, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I've seen that happen a lot with smaller companies, especially. I feel like teams may be given directives and you spend so much time doing your OKR planning and your goal setting at the beginning of a quarter or month, or even at the beginning of a sprint. And then something comes up, right? The CTO or the CEO says, we need to really focus on this right now. That changes priorities. And I've noticed a lot as an engineering manager, engineers feeling really frustrated by the friction of things, maybe because they are one step removed from the decisions and where they're being communicated. But it almost feels as EM and PM, you have to balance taking all this input from your higher ups that say we need to change the priority, or maybe they don't even say outright, we need to change priority. They just say, oh, have you looked into this? And what about this metric, which insinuates change your priorities. And then with engineers who are really gung-ho about your current roadmap and then being told to look into different things. I'm curious how anyone in this group thinks about managing that.
Yeah, I think we as leaders, I think it doesn't matter if you're product manager, engineering manager, or product design, right? I think we have to be careful on when it's too early to share something, when it's too early to distract the team with a problem that we don't even have a solution or idea of what that could be. And I feel there is a mistake that a lot of even senior leaders, sometimes I see oversharing problems or changing priority too much, just because they're not sure that whatever we're currently focusing on is not 100% shared there. And I think that creates a lot of distraction and a lot of confusion. So and I think it is hard to know when to share because you want to be transparent, because you want to raise awareness, and when to share because you're actually changing the roadmap, right? Sometimes you mention something as a comment and folks hear you and they say, oh, that means we need to prioritize this area of the code base we have not changed in years. That you're not actually saying that's like, it's just a possibility. And I think is a thing that also I think differentiates like product manager from super senior product manager is like when they share those things, when they say, no, we're not ready to talk about this. Let's like talk more and have some solid idea before you bring to the team. But I'd love to hear.
I had an idea about how to solve the situation when the senior management or someone on a higher up come and say, let's just shift the priority right now. I have a brilliant idea. Let's move. Most of my career I worked with startups or scale ups, and I had to learn with that. My idea is a bit stupid, but it worked with me. And I call it stupid even to the guys. I say, let's go for a coffee. I'm going to take you for an exercise. And I want them to feel the pain of context switching. And what I do is the following. I take a paper, just an A4 paper, give them a pen and say, now we're going to do an exercise here. So write in the first line from 1 to 10, second line from 10 to 1. Then we are going to time. And now we're going to do the following. Then we time that and say, now alternating 1, 10, and 2, 9, and so on. And then I do this and time, I show the difference. They already realize there is a 10% difference or something like this. So now let's add some complexity. Then I put from A to G, and I do the same with 3, and then with time. Generally, there is a loss because of context switch of 50%. And I look at them. You are super senior, and you are struggling with numbers and letters on context switching. What do you think happens in the heads of the engineers when you ask them to shift totally? Do you think they become more productive? They will waste a lot of time. If that's what you want, I'm going to go downstairs and tell them to change everything. Is that what you want? Then they feel the pain. They look at me and say, I didn't think about it, actually. I didn't know it's so costly. I said, it's way more than you imagine. Apart from the morale, apart from all the other aspects that will cause frustration, you are going to lose productivity. My learning from that is make them feel the pain and understand something they care about, productivity. They really care about it. And then whenever they come with this, I say, do you want to go to a coffee again? Shall I remember you? Shall I remind you that? And then at least we have a better conversation. We can wait and so on.
So I love this conversation about transparency because it's very close to my heart, because it goes together with something else, trust. And if I think back to any time that I've had a sort of destroyed relationship with a product manager, it's been because I didn't trust them or something. And usually because they were not transparent. So these things go hand in hand. And so how do you balance that? But how do you maintain that trust with the three amigos, but also with the downstream team, which is probably even more important because probably the three amigos are all going to be, they're amigos, right? They're good. But everyone else, I think, could, if they don't have some visibility into what's coming, that I've seen many people get upset at the PM, and it usually is no good when that happens.
I agree with you. So for me, the PM needs to set the conditions for the team to work. The vision, the strategy, and the objective need to be in place. Then the team knows the direction. But then once we are working with the three amigos, might be a lot of discovery happening and the team, what is happening and so on, start getting exciting. Then I go as information on demand. So I'm always open. If the team wants to know what I'm doing, I say, just ask, I will tell you. But then it's your choice. I'm going to tell you everything if you want to. But also what I do at least is at the end of the sprint, I take the chance in the sprint review also to share the results of that. So if we're working with Scrum, of course, it will be at the end of the sprint. But if we're working with Kanban, I always encourage to have a weekly or bi-weekly review, and then we present. Say, that's what we have learned, and potentially here there's an opportunity, still a bit undigested, but that might be something I will ask for your help to ideate and so on. But I'm always sharing. And I say, if you want to know more about it, how did we come to this? Just let's have a coffee and then I can walk you through.
I wanted to get into examples or your past experiences where you are working with a mismatched counterpart. So this can be an amazing product manager, who really has the forward going vision, nailed the current work plan down to a T, but let's say the engineering manager just isn't compatible, which could be a number of reasons, right? Maybe they're incompetent technically, maybe their personality doesn't gel with yours, maybe they have other priorities, and the other could be true as well, right? Where the engineering team is really strong, they know what needs to get done, they just need requirements, and for the life of them, they can't get straight requirements for the product from the product manager. So how, and this is for anyone to jump in, but maybe we'll start with you, David, on how do you work when there is a mismatch between the two pillars?
I had only a few situations with a strong mismatch. So for me, in these situations, feedback was my tool. So I would sit down and provide clear feedback, set expectations, and then I would say, here's where it didn't work because of this and this. And I would open up, say, what about myself? Is there anything you want to share? And so on. And then we would work from there. Unfortunately, it didn't change. Then I said, we are not progressing the way we want to go. And that is getting complicated because we need to deliver. And I'm afraid that you are getting in the way of delivering. I don't see change. In this case, I need to, unfortunately, go and talk to your leader if you're not willing to change. And the person looked at me and said, whatever, man. I'm telling you, we need to build everything correct from the beginning. And you come with this, he told me, bullshit of increasing technical debt to accelerate learning. I'm not willing to do that. So my team, we always do 2 code reviews. We always have 90% of test coverage and so on. We don't create technical debt. So this is wrong. I said, right or wrong, it's not black and white, but you're not listening and we're not trying to change, that I will need to report. And then this person ended up actually, he was let go in this case because it was a mismatch. But I try giving feedback as much as possible. And my exercise right now, what I do whenever I start working with a product trio, I call as expectations expected. We do an exercise upfront. What I expect from you, what I don't expect from you, what you can expect from me, and what you cannot expect from me. And we do both sides, and then we look at the gaps, and then we talk upfront. Then whenever on the way we break some of the things, we just bring this back again and say, did it change? What happened? So that's quite helpful to set expectations from the beginning.
I think feedback is the first thing. And if you have the opportunity to do a expectation setting, expectation workshop with the trio, I think is a great idea. I think like in case I had bad product managers in the past and probably not the most scalable idea, but I found that sometimes you need to wear both hats, right? When things are not working, at least temporarily, as engineer manager, you need to step in the product arena and to do things to help the team temporarily, right? So I think one thing that was good for me was to share examples of things we have done in the past, that past product managers have done. For example, okay, this is how a user story would look like. And here's a really good example. I start to have a collection of examples of both user stories or even roadmaps or even wireframes, whatever we had built in the past that worked great. And then whenever I have a new product manager and I see that they are not helping much, I share, I want to share with you some templates, some ideas on how we did in the past, and not to be prescriptive. But I think that helped that, that's exactly what you're expecting of me. I'm not getting that deep. I get it now. So I think like having those examples of those artifacts around can help a lot, especially new people, to get used to the expectations. Because one thing is to have a bullet point saying you should do this. Another thing is this is how it looks like in reality.
So when you're building out your roadmap or even thinking about launch, how do you measure the success of a product, and what metrics do you track to ensure that it's meeting technical and business goals at the same time?
I always look at what matters most right now. So it's very important to understand the moment of the product. Is it growth, maturity, what is happening, and so on. Let's say it's in a moment of growth, then it is about scaling up, increasing the number of users, active users, and so on. So I would look at metrics that make the change. So growth rate and so on, and reducing churn rate and these metrics. Of course, depends on what the company wants to achieve. But then when you look at these metrics, they are a little bit late to measure. Once you realize that your growth didn't make it, so what do? So it's too late. You can just act for the next month, maybe. So what I like doing is working backwards, saying what does lead to growth? And then we will find the metrics and say, this is what we need to measure. And if we see these things derailing, we must act. This is in terms of product. And then when it comes in terms of technical aspects, generally we will look at the response time and also number of 404 and errors and so on. But this, I generally leave more to the team. I try focusing more on the product aspect, and then we try combining them. For me, I need to set the goal where we want to land, and if we're gonna grow, how far are we growing? Because then the team can prepare for an infrastructure for that, and then we measure the results accordingly.
So how do you react in case your metrics were off, right? You were expecting this huge product launch, and now suddenly you see the churn has gone up like crazy because they don't like it for whatever reason. What would your next steps be in that case?
In general, I hope I would have realized it doesn't work way before the launch, because I start with a small launch, like 0.5% of the audience, 1%, and I gradually scale. So it wouldn't be a big surprise. And if I see for this audience is not working, then I would start discovering that what's happening. I would try talking to people and so on, look at the leading metrics, so to say, where are they dropping and what is causing this drop. And one of the things I like the most, apart from talking to the users, is becoming the user. So let me become the user and behave. Generally, when I do that, I see it, of course, the guys are going to churn. I can understand that. For example, that's what happened when I applied for one interview in Brazil, and I became a customer. I made 3 orders, I returned 2. And when I came to the interview, the guy said, why should I hire you? I said, because your process sucks. I tried to return. I had to call 3 people. I couldn't do that. And the refund, oh my God, that was a nightmare to do it. I said, these are reasons probably you are going to lose customers. Whenever they have problems, they're not going to come back to you. And I want to come here to change it. So I gave a lot of ideas where to change. And then curious enough, I got the offer the same day, and it was super fun.
There's a solid pro tip for if you're going to interview somewhere, use their product so you can make suggestions. I have a question for you around, you're talking about A/B tests a second ago. When and where do you decide either we're going to pivot and this is not going to work for us and we need to abandon strategy, or we need to persevere because we don't have enough data?
Yeah. So in the when I go to the A/B test, I would say then I try being very realistic with data. So I look and say 70% is success. Then we persevere. 50%, probably we can improve and try something different. I would say if it reaches 70%, we scale up. But 50%, we persevere. But if it's going less than that, say this has some, for example, when we define the numbers, of course, I gave high numbers, but I would be like that. And I would define these numbers before starting the test. And I wouldn't go to 7%. I would say maybe 7 out of 10, something like this. I want to test with a small audience to ensure that everyone has the same perspective. And once we are with a bigger audience, then I would go with a percentage. But I would decide to drop the moment I realize that we tried 2 different approaches, and no matter what I do, it doesn't work. So it means we got the problem wrong.
So when we ask, tell me if someone is a good or bad product manager, the one thing that came to my mind is there are those product managers that whenever they don't know what to do or they're afraid to make decisions, is let's do A/B tests. Let's experiment with this because we don't know. And usually those A/B tests take weeks, if not months, right? And they are more a symptom that they're avoiding to make a decision than something that is the right thing to do. So I have seen this as a pattern in a lot of different places where we are overusing A/B testing, we're overdoing experimentation, right? It's like there are a lot of cases that we have to do experiment, but I have seen an overuse of that, and that's really frustrating to engineering. And I think that kills velocity more than tech debt sometimes, because is like doing experiments is not something that should be time consuming. But once you get enough experiments going on in parallel on the same area of the app, of the code base, is really hard to do anything there. And like the complexity of managing multiple experimentation, like without having overlaps, is really hard.
Tiago,
Yeah.
this is what, funny enough, this is what Twitter was accused of doing too much of before Elon took over, right? He said they were running crazy experiments for so long and they couldn't come up with an answer.
Do you folks see this as a pattern across companies? Do you see this as a problem? Overusing A/B tests?
I see that, yes. I remember when I worked in a startup, early stage, it was still in the seed level. At some point in time, seed level, we had 33 A/B tests running. It's insane. I look at that. It was when I arrived. Why? I said, yeah, we need to compare several versions and so on. And then the CEO said, yeah, I learned that companies like Amazon and so on, they do around 100 tests a day or even more. And so we need to start to have cultivating this culture, and then we ensure that we get to that level. I said, but what do you want to achieve, or what do you want to avoid with this? He couldn't answer. We were doing A/B tests for the sake of doing it.
100% agree with this. This sort of because bigger companies are doing this has plagued everything from engineering to design and UX, right? I find that some UX teams use A/B tests as a way to stay relevant, because you have a product that works well, it looks great, and now you start to test everything from font size to the color of submit buttons, because you've been convinced that you have to do this. We have to test the color of, the hue of blue. We have to run 3 tests. It's not going to be users don't actually care.
One of my friends, I won't mention the company, but it's a big tech company. He's a great product designer. And for 3 months, what he managed to do was to shape the corners of one button of one specific experience. And he told me we ran several A/B tests there, and then we proved with the rounded corners, the conversion rate increased 0.03. That's quite good. 3 months.
Love it. Love it. Yes, rounded corners and 50 shades of gray. That'll take your A/B testing all the way. Maybe just switching gears a little bit, and I wanted to get into interviews. What are some ways to effectively interview a product manager? And I know you've been through a lot of interviews, David, and at different size companies as well. So do you have recommendations on maybe engineering managers or technical folks interviewing PMs, or even in general, what are some good questions to try and gauge fit?
So of course, it depends what you are searching for exactly, the kind of PM, but I want to know how they think and how they act. So I don't ask what they would do in general. I ask, share with me a success story. Why was that successful? Your contribution to it. Share that. And then I want to see their thinking process. And then I go to the other question I love more. Now share something with me where you failed. And I want to know exactly your contribution to that. And why was it a failure? To see if the person take accountability and take the lesson from that. So I want to see this part. And then sometimes I may bring a case after this if I like the answers. And I don't want them to prepare for the case, because for me, PM is about thinking fast. It's about connecting the dots and asking questions and so on. And when I give the case, I'm searching for something. Is this person an achiever or a doer? Because if the person starts being like a waiter asking like, oh, what would you like? What would you do? And so on, and try just to bring something on top of what I'm asking and say, this is more like a doer. Might be that I need a doer that moment, then I could proceed. But if I need an achiever, I want someone who imagine something different than what. So these are things I like doing, stories, and then seeing how they think and act fast. I also generally ask, how do they receive feedback? And I ask them to share a story where they received feedback, was hard to digest, and what that made with them.
Pretty good. I think the one comment I was gonna make is interview is a lot about looking in the past, like what you have done in like in the past, in like previous experience, and a lot less asking like philosophical questions about what would you do or like. And I think like when you look for experience or stories, I think you can judge like two things. I think one is if they're good at what they do, right? And how they have done in the past, and at what level, what kind of projects, what kind of interactions they had, what kind of challenges they had. Because if they mention something, but at the same time bring a super small project, a super tiny area of responsibility, that tells you a lot. Maybe they did well, but on a really small, complex environment. So I actually have a few questions that I used to ask PMs whenever I interview them. And one of my favorite is asking them like, how do they balance product features and technical things in the roadmap? But more importantly is I asked them to give me an example about a time that they did that effectively. And I want to hear more what was the situation? What kind of like infrastructure work did they prioritize? Do they understand why was that important? And I think that tells a lot about the kind of complexity that this product manager has seen in the past. Mitra?
Yeah, I have a question for David and anyone else who's been in the situation. Context is that at one point I thought I might want to go into product management. And so I'm curious, how do you tweak the interview, or what do you look for in engineers or engineering managers who are maybe looking to go into this space?
I look generally on the ability of thinking strategic, because many engineers, including myself, I was an engineer, I was mainly thinking on the now, what to achieve in the short term, 3 months and so on. And I was not really thinking on the long term. So I want to see if the engineer has this skill. And I want also to know how the engineer would feel about not coding, because that's a very thin line. Once you go to product, you need to trust the team will do the job well, and so on. Because I had a lot of situation when I became a product manager, I knew some things could be done faster, and the engineers were telling me that they needed more time, and I didn't like that. So how would you react in this situation? This is a hypothetical situation, but then I say, was there a situation that an engineer in your team wanted to do something you didn't see to be the best approach? You have to deal with that. Tell me what you did. Because a product manager, for example, I would say, is that the best option? Have you ever thought about other options? So I try to help them to think about it more. So I want to see if the person has this ability, and also look into the business and so on. And if the person is willing to learn, because it's a different job. It's a more complex one. And I make it transparent. You are going to talk to a lot of people, and either you like or not, your days will be in a lot of meetings. You can reduce that, but how do you like being in meetings and people constantly dropping? So I try understanding the intentions, and then I ask questions like, what makes you interested in product management? What would define success for you, to see how they think? And I gave chance for many engineers. Some of them were successful, and some of them said, you know what, this role is not for me. I'm going to go back to engineering.
I love that you mentioned how deep do they stick their nose into the engineering stuff, because actually one of the questions that I used to ask is draw up the architecture for the last successful system that you were a part of with the engineering team. And it was a trick question, right? Anybody could draw a few boxes, but the deeper they went into that, it was a sign for me that they probably stuck their nose a little too deep, and they don't know what the hell they're talking about now. And so it's a very interesting thing. I do think engineers don't like it when you're telling them how to build the system or the best way to build the system, and you might know a way to do it and all of that. So I love that answer. I want to ask something else. Before this podcast, Al gave us some homework. He gave us a bunch of your articles. You have some wonderful stuff out there. I love writing online myself. And actually, if I think back, probably my favorite product manager that I've ever had as a partner wrote the most wonderful product briefs. These things were just a pleasure to read. And it really got me thinking about what writing might be one of, to me, from observing, I've never done the job of product officially, but from observing, it might be one of the most important skills. So how do you balance that? How do you tease that out in interviews? Is that something that you look for at all? How important is writing? Just a general question for PMs that you all have worked with.
It is highly important because you need to write precise emails, not, I would say, memorandums. So you write something that people can digest and then they, boom, make the decision fast, short message and so on. But there's a tricky aspect also. I asked them, like, give me an example of the 3-4 user stories you're proud of. How did you write them? Write them to me. I want to see them. And then the more detail I see there, the more I panic. Because the more I see this guy he wants to provide clear details to the team. So then I start getting afraid because there's the balance of writing and writing to set the context. So if you set the context, then you are short with the word and so on. But you're right that if the person struggles to write, it will be a troublesome job. But if the person also loves to write, it will be troublesome the same way, because then the person will rely too much on written communication. Then you will see the big threads on Jira and then a lot of exchange on email and so on. So I like asking them, like, how often do you call your colleagues? So what makes you call them and so on? I try finding the balance of writing and really communication and engaging with the team.
Amazing. I was going to comment that, like, the more prescriptive or the more they overuse writing, right? I think the worse it is. And I think, like, that is a really important goal of writing, is how effective they are driving context with whatever they write. And if the shorter they're able to write, giving the same context, the better. But I think I remember seeing user stories that were like page long with given when then there were like 15 lines for one scenarios. And I remember having to coach some product managers to, like, no, this should never be more than 5 steps, because something is wrong when they're being prescriptive about what kind of button you're gonna click. And so I think is an exercise of iterating on the writing, right? It's not because your first writing is not gonna be effective, right? You're gonna have to polish a lot to be able to share with the team something a little bit more digestible, right? And not something that's all over the place.
David, maybe I'll ask you one more question to make sure that we stay on track with time. So what advice would you give to engineering managers or even dev teams who want to work more closely with their product managers, their counterparts, to drive successful product development? Because at the end of the day, it is a joint effort. Everyone has skin in the game. What are some suggestions that you would give out?
Ask more questions about the problem. That's what I would ask. Because I see many engineers asking for more requirements, more direction, and so on, and saying, what am I supposed to do? What is in the backlog? Sometimes I hear engineering saying, a great backlog is the one that is full, so I can just pick something and work on it. And I don't need to talk to anyone. So my recommendation is really ask questions to understand the problem you're about to solve. Engage on that. And if the PM cannot answer that, then you should tell the PM, please do your homework and then come back once you understand the problem. Because if you don't understand, we cannot solve the problem. We may actually solve a problem we don't have and create one that we should not have.
Solid advice. Thank you, David. And again, we can probably go on for 3 more hours, but I want to be respectful of your time and everyone else's here. Before we all sign off, where can folks find you, David? Do you want to share some contact details before we wrap up?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn, David Pereira, or you can also subscribe to my Substack newsletter. It's Untrapping Product Team. You will find under dpereira.substack.com.
Awesome. Thank you for taking the time. We will include all of these in the show notes as well, so all of you have it. But thank you to everyone watching and listening. We will see you back in a week.